It began as a routine excavation, just another attempt to piece together the puzzle of our ancient past. In a quiet valley far from modern cities, beneath layers of soil, stone, and time, archaeologists descended into a dark cave that had not echoed with human breath for over 14,000 years. What they unearthed was not merely a cache of bones, but a window into the bleakest chapters of human survival. There, scattered across the cavern floor, were the dismembered and scarred remains of Ice Age people, cut, broken, and processed, in a way that could only mean one thing: cannibalism. The announcement sent shockwaves through the global archaeological community. This was not a battlefield, nor the site of an animal feast. These were human beings, men, women, and children, who had been butchered and consumed by members of their own species. The implications were staggering. It wasn't just about starvation. It wasn't just about death. It was about what humans are capable of in their most desperate hour, and what those moments tell us about who we truly are. To the untrained eye, the remains might have seemed random or chaotic, just another ancient burial site lost to time. But to scientists, the subtle details told a horrifying story. Precise cuts where tendons once connected muscle to bone, skulls shattered to extract brain matter, and even cranial fragments carved into drinking bowls. These weren't the accidental markings of decay. They were deliberate acts, and they were not isolated. As news of the find spread, historians, anthropologists, and psychologists grappled with the brutal truth. Cannibalism was not a rare anomaly. In the ancient world, it may have been a grim part of early human life. It challenged romantic notions of noble prehistoric hunters and pushed researchers to confront one of the oldest, most deeply rooted taboos in human history. But beyond the horror lies something more profound. These ancient remains do not just speak of death. They whisper of survival, culture, belief, and transformation. They tell a story of a species struggling not just against the elements, but against the limits of its own morality. This is not just the story of bones in a cave. It is the story of us. Roughly 50,000 to 10,000 years ago, the Earth was locked in the grip of the last ice age, a period known to scientists as the late Pleistocene. Temperatures across much of the planet were significantly lower than today. Giant glaciers covered enormous parts of North America, Europe, and Asia, stretching thousands of miles and transforming the landscape into an arid, icy expanse. Where there wasn't ice, there were frigid winds, steppe-like plains, and dry tundras, punctuated by scattered coniferous forests and animal herds. In this harsh environment, Homo sapiens were relatively new to the scene, sharing the Earth with Neanderthals and Denisovans, with whom they occasionally interbred and competed. These early humans had no permanent homes. Instead, they moved continuously in small kin-based groups of perhaps 20 to 50 people, wandering vast distances in search of seasonal prey and foraging grounds. Each member of the group had to contribute: children, elders, hunters, gatherers. Their survival depended on cooperation, cunning, and an evolving toolkit made of flint blades, antler spear tips, bone needles, and later, the bow and arrow. Food was never guaranteed. While large Ice Age mammals like mammoths, aurochs, woolly rhinoceroses, and reindeer provided meat, skins, and bones, hunting them was dangerous and uncertain. A failed hunt could mean starvation. Plants were scarce, and long winters made food storage essential, but the techniques were crude. Death from exposure, injury, or hunger was common, and when these pressures mounted, when the herd didn't return, or the snow came early, it's likely that some communities turned to the most taboo act in modern moral thinking: cannibalism. But, for Ice Age humans, this wasn't always out of cruelty or madness. It may have been ritualistic. It may have been a grim form of respect for the dead. Or it may simply have been the final desperate act of those faced with extinction. What's clear is that life during the Ice Age was raw, brutal, and unforgiving. And in that primal world, every survival decision carried unimaginable weight. Tens of thousands of years later, in the quiet shadow of limestone cliffs or hidden woodland caves, archaeologists stumbled upon something that defied simple explanation. A team of excavators, equipped with ground-penetrating radar, fine brushes, and carbon dating instruments, began uncovering a cluster of bones deep within a Paleolithic cave. The site, possibly Gough's Cave in Britain, or El Miran in Spain, or another Ice Age site still being studied, yielded a disturbing archaeological scene. As layers of sediment were removed, the cave walls seemed to whisper forgotten stories. The bones that emerged were human, but they weren't lying peacefully. They were shattered, dismembered, and scattered as if subjected to a systematic process. Adult skulls had been delicately scraped clean of flesh and brain matter. Long bones were broken in half, with ends crushed open, suggesting a purposeful attempt to extract marrow. Even more unsettling, some skull caps had been shaped and smoothed, seemingly fashioned into bowls, deliberate modifications that bore cultural, perhaps symbolic, meaning. The surrounding soil revealed traces of fire pits, flint tools, and animal remains. Charred bones, both human and non-human, indicated roasting. Microscopic analysis of cut marks on the human remains showed patterns identical to those seen in the butchery of animals. It was not random. It was surgical. It was survival, or ritual. Further analysis through radiocarbon dating placed the bones at roughly 14,700 years old, toward the end of the last glacial maximum. Isotope tests revealed that the individuals had diets rich in animal protein, consistent with hunter-gatherers of the time. Genetic testing showed they were closely related, suggesting they may have been members of the same community, possibly even family. This changed everything. The idea of Ice Age cannibalism was no longer hypothetical, it was fact. And the story, embedded in the bones, was not one of isolated madness, but a glimpse into the reality of a world where nature offered little mercy. What the excavators had uncovered was not just evidence of cannibalism. It was a frozen moment in time, one that captured a community teetering on the edge of survival and revealing the dark instincts that humanity may call upon when pushed beyond its limits. At first glance, the skeletal remains seemed no different from other Ice Age burial finds. But as osteologists examined the bones under magnification and scanned them with 3D imaging, a dark and chilling picture began to emerge, one written not in language, but in the markings carved into the very calcium of the dead. Clean, V-shaped. Incisions covered key joints and soft tissue areas, especially the ribs, jaws, pelvis, and limbs. Precisely the spots where a skilled butcher would remove muscle from an animal carcass. These were not random fractures caused by time or geology. They were deliberate, measured, and expertly made with flint blades. Further analysis revealed spiral fractures in the long bones, femurs, humeri, and tibiae, indicating that the bones had been broken while still fresh and flexible. This is a classic sign of marrow extraction, suggesting not only hunger, but a detailed understanding of human anatomy. In some cases, children's bones showed the same treatment, raising the horrifying possibility that no one was exempt. Perhaps the most disturbing finds were the modified skulls, especially crania that had been carefully defleshed and reshaped, some even polished into smooth bowls. To modern minds, such artifacts evoke revulsion, but to Ice Age humans, they may have held ritual significance. Were they ceremonial drinking vessels, trophies, memorial objects, or merely utilitarian tools forged in desperation? No definitive answer exists, yet their very presence points to a practice that extended beyond mere survival into the realms of social behavior, belief, and symbolic action. Scientists compared the cut patterns to those found on butchered animal remains from the same layer, and the similarities were unmistakable. The human bones were treated just like hunted prey. This chilling parallel not only confirmed cannibalism, but shattered assumptions that Ice Age societies were governed solely by familial bonds or primitive compassion. In moments of crisis, the line between kin and food may have blurred. As researchers pieced together the site's grim puzzle, a fundamental question loomed. Was this cannibalism driven purely by the need to survive, or was it part of something deeper, something cultural, symbolic, or even spiritual? To answer this, scholars turn to anthropology, seeking clues in the behaviors of other indigenous and prehistoric societies. One possibility was survival cannibalism, an act committed during times of extreme starvation, like the infamous Donner Party or shipwrecked sailors of more recent history. During Ice Age winters, when food sources vanished and mobility became impossible, communities trapped in caves or valleys may have faced horrifying choices. The dead, already gone, might have been viewed as a final resource to keep the living alive. This explanation is perhaps the simplest and most emotionally palatable. But a second theory proposes ritual cannibalism, a practice bound not to necessity, but to belief. In some ancient societies, consuming the dead was seen as a way to honor them, absorb their spirit, or prevent their soul from wandering. Others used cannibalism to assert dominance, mark territory, or enact punishment. The use of skull bowls, for instance, has appeared in cultures ranging from ancient Tibet to the Scythians and Celts, suggesting a broader human fascination with the symbolic power of the body. In the case of the Ice Age site, clues suggest both possibilities may be true. Some bones bore signs of careful treatment, clean cuts, preserved segments, hinting at a ritual process. Others were smashed haphazardly, stripped and discarded, more indicative of brutal necessity. This mixture of reverence and violence paints a complex portrait of prehistoric life, where hunger, grief, belief, and fear could coexist in the same moment. It challenges modern romanticized notions of early humans as purely noble survivors. Instead, it reveals a more nuanced reality, a people caught between their animal instincts and their evolving sense of meaning. In the bitter cold of the Ice Age, the body was not just a vessel of life. It was also, sometimes, the last offering to keep that life going. To understand the tragedy at the heart of the site, scientists and forensic anthropologists turned their attention to the people themselves, the victims whose shattered remains told a story deeper than any tool or cave painting ever could. With advanced scanning, DNA analysis, and facial reconstruction software, researchers began to piece together who these individuals were, not just how they died, but how they lived. The bones belonged to a mix of men, women, and children. Some were likely young mothers, others older hunters. A child's femur was found beside the fragmented skull of what may have been a teenage boy. Isotope testing suggested they all consumed a protein-heavy diet, rich in large game, consistent with other Ice Age hunter-gatherers. DNA samples extracted from the bones revealed familial links. Many of the individuals were closely related. This wasn't the aftermath of a battle with strangers or enemies. It was internal. The community had turned inward. The wear on their teeth and bones spoke volumes. Signs of arthritis in the joints of older individuals indicated a life of physical hardship. The children's bones bore signs of malnutrition and disease, possibly scurvy or rickets, brought on by long winters and poor access to plant-based nutrients. Trauma marks, like healed fractures, pointed to previous injuries endured in hunting or travel, perhaps even interpersonal violence. These people were survivors, resilient, hardened, and intimately familiar with pain. And yet, in their final moments, that resilience wasn't enough. They died not in battle or peacefully in sleep, but in circumstances likely marked by starvation, fear, and betrayal. The forensic reconstructions of their faces, made possible through cranial modeling and digital approximation, offered haunting human portraits. Wide eyes, strong brows, youthful lips frozen in time. The realization struck deep. These weren't faceless ancients. They were individuals, families, a community, and they met an end that still shakes the core of our shared humanity. As scholars examined the site in Europe, they realized it was not an anomaly. It was part of a much broader, more unsettling pattern found across Ice Age human history. Similar evidence of cannibalism has surfaced at archaeological sites from Gough's Cave in England to El Cedron in Spain, from the Marillac rock shelter in France to the Moravian sites in the Czech Republic. In each case, the themes echo: isolated human groups, extreme climate stress, broken and butchered bones, and ambiguous motives. In El Cedron, Spain, the remains of at least 12 Neanderthals showed identical signs of being defleshed and processed, like game animals. In France, sites dating back over 15,000 years contain skull fragments used as tools or bowls. Across the globe, from the Americas to Asia, ancient human remains sometimes carry the same chilling evidence: cut marks, crushed bones, and even gnawed edges, teeth marks of one human upon another. The patterns are consistent enough that many anthropologists now believe cannibalism during the Ice Age may have been more common than previously imagined. It wasn't always the act of monstrous individuals. It was part of the human condition under pressure. The end of the Ice Age was a time of immense uncertainty. Glaciers receded, ecosystems changed, prey animals migrated or vanished, and humans found themselves adapting or dying. In this crucible, the taboo we now attach to cannibalism had not yet formed. The concept of food and flesh had blurred boundaries. What seems horrific to us may have been, for them, a practical, if soul-wrenching choice. This widespread occurrence across time and geography doesn't just challenge our moral assumptions, it reframes them. It suggests that cannibalism was a human strategy, one that emerged repeatedly when climate, isolation, and desperation struck. The Ice Age didn't only forge tools and tribes, it also carved the darker instincts of survival into our bones. And perhaps the memory of that darkness lingers in our taboos today. To truly understand what the Ice Age cannibalism sites reveal, we must look beyond archaeology, into the very evolution of our species. For cannibalism, as grim as it seems, is not merely a historical footnote. It may have played a crucial, even paradoxical role in shaping the physical, social, and psychological traits of modern humans. From a biological standpoint, the consumption of human flesh carries serious risks, chief among them the transmission of deadly prion diseases like Kuru and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, both of which attack the brain. Yet these diseases arise specifically when cannibalism becomes ritualized. And long-term, the fact that modern human populations in Papua New Guinea, where endocannibalism was once practiced, evolved genetic mutations to resist prions, suggests a haunting truth. Cannibalism was once common enough in human prehistory to drive genetic adaptation. Our very DNA still carries evidence of those dark survival strategies, but evolution isn't just biological, it's social. The act of cannibalism may have helped early humans develop powerful taboos, systems of morality, and even law. The revulsion we feel today toward the idea of consuming another human being is not universal. It had to be learned, and over time, deeply culturally embedded. That revulsion may have originated as a survival strategy itself, once the dangers of cannibalism were realized. In other words, the horror we now associate with it could be the echo of ancient lessons burned into our collective memory, that eating the dead might keep you alive in the short term, but doom your group in the long term. Moreover, the very complexity of cannibalism, the tension between hunger and horror, ritual and revulsion, may have spurred early human storytelling, myth-making, and spiritual belief systems. Many ancient religions contain warnings or tales of humans consuming one another, always paired with punishment or transformation. These stories, passed down orally through generations, may have originated from lived experience, transformed over time into fables, taboos, and sacred rules. In this way, cannibalism shaped not only the bodies of early humans, but their minds. The ethical boundaries it forced, the rituals it birthed, and the consequences it wrought likely contributed to the formation of human empathy, kinship systems, and eventually, law and civilization. The bones unearthed in a dark cave, marked by blades and fire, are not only tragic, they are pivotal. They represent a point of transformation, a moment in which the line between survival and society was painfully drawn. A reminder that before we built cities, temples, or laws, we survived by making unthinkable choices. And that, perhaps, is what made us human. The unearthing of cannibalized Ice Age skeletons is more than just an archaeological milestone. It's a deeply unsettling mirror reflecting who we once were and, in some ways, who we still are. Beneath the dirt and stone, under millennia of sediment, lay not just bones but buried truths about the human condition. In a world dominated by cold winds, scarce food, and the ever-present specter of death, Even our earliest ancestors were forced to grapple with impossible choices, choices that strip away the illusions of romanticized prehistory and replace them with a raw, brutal reality. The evidence does not accuse, it illuminates. It reminds us that cannibalism is not just the province of ancient myths or horror stories, but a response rooted in extreme conditions, primal needs, and complex rituals. It shows us a side of Ice Age humanity we may not want to confront, the capability for both deep care and desperate cruelty within the same community, perhaps within the same person. This discovery also raises profound questions about our moral evolution. How far have we come? Are our modern ethics a stable foundation, or just a thin layer of civility that cracks under enough pressure? The bones speak not only of hunger, but of symbolism, of grief, of survival in a world where every decision carried mortal weight. They urge us to rethink assumptions about prehistoric people as either noble savages or savage beasts, showing instead that they were human in every sense, complex, adaptive, frightened, and imaginative. The story buried in those ancient caves is not just about death. It is also about memory, adaptation, and resilience. We are the descendants of those who made it through the coldest nights, the harshest winters, and the darkest moments. Their choices, however painful, paved the road to civilization. And in the quiet echoes of their bones, we find not only horror, but humanity.